So tonight, it'll be just a little different. I just want to share with you what God allowed me to see and do while I was in Spain for the last few weeks. This is really a condensed version. I was not exaggerating. Someone asked me this morning after church. They said, "Were you kidding about 430 pictures and videos?" I'm like, "No." And I went back and looked. It's 434 pictures and videos. I just wanted to make sure you got a good picture of what God is doing. Faith Baptist Church participates with about 60 or 61 missionary families and organizations. Some of them we've just started partnering with this year. Others, like the Bonikowskis, we've gone back a long way. We started supporting them in 1990, and they have been missionaries to Spain. And God opened up this door. Actually, Andy invited me to come and speak to this missionary teen retreat in 2020 or 2020. I was supposed to go. And then COVID came and shut Europe down. So this is the first time, I think since 2003 or 2004, that they had not had a missionary teen retreat. The teen retreat is, I wasn't speaking to a bunch of Spanish teenagers. These are the teenage kids of American missionaries all over Europe. They go there every year for the first week of December, and this is just a retreat for them. So they come from several different places, and he asked me to teach on the life of David, and then I did end up going to a couple of the churches that he works with as well. And so I thought about how to do this tonight because I did get to see just more than that, and I want to present it to you in such a way that it whets your appetite to go and visit, if not Andy and Mimi, to go visit somebody else in our missionary family. Now, some of our missionaries, you're not going to be able to go visit with because of where they're at. You're not going to be able to get in. But by and large, the majority of them, you could. You could take your vacation, and for a family of 4, I promise you, you'll spend less than you will taking them to Disney than you will going on a missions trip. It is an incredible experience. I'll do whatever I can to facilitate that for you. If you have a particular field that you'd like to go to, I'll contact our missionary and see when's a good time for you to come. But I would pray about that if I were you. Here's something that I regret as a dad. I did not do that with my kids. I regret as a dad that I did not get my kids on the mission field. It is a missed opportunity for me now. So now, like I'm telling Jake, and I've told Heidi, Jake, I said, Jake, you don't have anything to do with your money. You don't have a wife. You don't have kids. I said, go to Zambia and visit Johannes. Now I just got off the phone with him last night. I said, go to Spain and visit Andy. Next year will be wherever. If we go visit Amber, it's going to be, you need to go to the Philippines, Jake, and visit Amber. But I really want to encourage you to pray about that. I think it'll change the way you view our missionaries. And you've got a good heart. We've got a good heart here at Faith Baptist Church for missions. But I think you'll see if you can get on the field with them and stay with them for a week. I think you'll be impressed. And the reason I'm telling you that is because there is a family there this week, and this is their 5th missionary teen retreat. They're members of Andy and Mimi's church. They're not in full-time ministry. He has a job, she has a job. But they take a week of their vacation, actually about a week and a half of their vacation, and they go to Spain the first week of every December, and they just go to pitch in and help. Elizabeth plays the piano. Chuck is a woodworker, and he's done a lot of the woodwork that you'll see around the farmhouse in the pictures tonight. And it was just a great experience. So I hope tonight's an encouragement to you, not only to see what your missions dollars have been doing as far as the work going on, but also to challenge you about what else does God want me to do as far as worldwide missions goes. What if he wants you to go? Andy and Mimi grew up on this field, but their parents didn't. Their parents were American. They were American couples that God called to go to the mission field. And now there's 3 generations of Bonikowskis that have served in the Basque region of Spain. And so thank the Lord for it. So let's have a word of prayer tonight, and then we'll walk through this. I've entitled this, is that up there yet? Good News from the Basque Country of Spain, because I just saw so much there that God's grace has accomplished. You remember that verse in Acts where it says the church in Antioch sent Barnabas to go inspect what was going on among the Gentiles. And it said when he came there, he was glad to see the grace of God. And that's kind of what you get to do when you visit these missionaries and see God's grace at work, doing just what we're doing here tonight. Gathering together, singing some songs, taking up missions offerings, preaching the gospel, fellowshipping during the week. It's great to see that. One day we all get to do that together. But hopefully this will be an encouragement. We'll have a good time of fellowship together tonight. All right? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the day. Thank you for your blessings on Faith Baptist Church. And I believe, Lord, the reason you're so good to us is because we have tapped into your heart for the world. And you have a group of people here that are concerned about the souls, not just of Americans, but of Spaniards and people that live in the Basque country and in China and in Ethiopia and all over this world. And so I pray that tonight is an encouragement as folks get to see fruit of their investment. And Lord, I'm relying a lot on technology tonight. And so I just pray that you'd keep it going smoothly so that your work is clearly presented there in Spain. Thank you again for the opportunity we have to gather together. And I pray all this in your name. Amen. Well, we'll do this a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to sit over here to be out of the way. Normally, we have a projector back there on the wall, and it cheats, and I can look back there and see what's up here, but that thing has been uncooperative lately. So I'm going to sit over here and see kind of what's going on, and then we'll go from there. I also wrote a bunch of cheat notes out because if I don't, we will be here till Tuesday, and you don't want to be here that long. And so I wrote down notes to say on each slide, and I'll try to contain myself on it, okay? I'm trying to sit where all of you can see me, but the important thing is not me. The important thing is going on here. So Andy and Mimi live in the northern part of Spain in what is called the Basque region. David and Denise Cross, he was the pastor here before me, they visited Andy and Mimi. In fact, that was their first missions trip. They visited the Bonikowskis in the mid-90s. That was prior to the purchase of the farmhouse that you're going to see. And the Living Hope Baptist Church was also in a different facility. So a lot has changed with this ministry, but Andy and Mimi still talk about Pastor and Denise's visit with them and what an encouragement that was. And so when I refer to the Basque country tonight, if you're not familiar with that, and I wasn't, and you probably are more in tune with this, the Basque are very different than the Spaniards. They have a very separatist attitude, and if the Basque region had their way, it'd be two separate countries, but they don't. And so they're part of Spain, but that's kind of where that Basque sense comes from. They're very distinct. Their language is even different. In fact, Andy and Mimi's son, Danny Bonikowski, he's the only one in the family that's fairly fluent in Basque because it's just a completely different language than Spanish. So Andy and Mimi have been partnered with Faith Baptist Church since 1990. Both of them were raised in Spain. Andy in the northern part, in this region of Spain, the Basque country. Mimi's parents I think they started down more in mid to southern Spain and church planners there. So these two grew up on the mission field. And behind them is the farmhouse, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. They don't live here. This is a retreat center. They do Bible institutes there. They had a wedding there yesterday. They live about 1.5 miles or 2 miles down off the mountain from the farmhouse. We'll talk about that more, but I did want you to see them. A great couple. We are privileged to partner with some great missionaries, and they've just been faithful in all of this. So, sights and scenes. Let's just click through some pretty pictures. What I'm trying to do is get you to go to Spain, visit the Bonikowskis, so however we can attract you. This is definitely one of the most prettiest places I've ever been. That scene right there was our drive to the farmhouse every morning. It doesn't get old. I flew into Bilbao. Bilbao is the third or fourth largest city, Andy said. It's right on the port. of northern, or right on the coast rather, of northern Spain, a port city. It was beautiful, and you can't tell it in that picture, but you're just at sea level, and then there'll be these mountains that come right up to it, and there'll be a 100-foot cliff going straight up out of the water. And I told Andy, I said, this is the prettiest place I've ever flown into. He said, how was the wind? I said, or how was the landing? And I said, landing was great. He said, that's really good. He said, I was so nervous. He said, most of the time when you land here, he said, the planes come in at an angle sideways because the crosswind's so bad. And then right before you touch down, they just straighten out. And I thought, Lord, I am so happy that did not happen, because I've got my trepidations about flying anyway. I did not need that happening at all. This is their little village, the little town of Thegama. It sits down at the base of two mountains, about 1,500 people. Andy and Mimi, I don't know how good I steer with this. Andy and Mimi live in that apartment building right there. You buy the apartment. You don't rent the apartment. You buy it, so it's technically their house. And they've got a good place there, and they've lived there for a number of years. A small 3-bedroom, bath-and-a-half apartment. They raised their 4 kids in it. 3 bunk beds in a room with the boys. Rachel got her own room, and Andy and Mimi had a room. And so you can guess who was the princess of that house. This is the view out their front window. And he has a recliner. He sat on the couch all the time. He has a recliner that faces that window. I sat there every day that I possibly could. I said, I don't know how you get used to this view. Those are all sheep fields out that front window, and they go right up. They just move them from field to field. That's the mountain that's above the, and I'm showing you this for a reason. I'm so thankful to see Brian Solford's here tonight, because I want Brian to see this. The farmhouse is sitting, you can't see it here, but the farmhouse sits somewhere behind that hill right there. We climbed up to that hill. And that last hill there, I mean, it was ridiculous. There's some rock bluffs right there. You can't see that well. But that's the mountain we climbed during the hike. I honestly thought I was going to have a heart attack going up that thing. Andy and Mimi Bonikowski are both older than I am. That's the view from that bluff up there. You can see the farmhouse is that little spot right there. And then there's their city of Thegama. It was beautiful, but it is for goats. That place, literally, they graze goats and sheep all over this place, and I'm like, they're the only ones that belong up here. But it was such a beautiful country. It's very different from southern and middle Spain. Very mountainous, as you can see. It's December, still very green, and a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. We had a good time hiking together. Andy and Mimi do this a lot, apparently. Excuse me. And they hiked up that thing just so much quicker than I did. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Mimi got the dog out. They got a farm dog there, a Spanish Mastiff, and she was way ahead of me. I do want you to know I was not the last person up that hill. I did beat 4 of those teenagers up that hill. But Mimi was up there with that dog, and then for whatever reason, she came walking down. I think it was to hook up with Andy down the hill a little bit. So I went on up the hill, and then a few minutes later, Mimi and the dog come walking up the hill. And I told Andy, I said, if I would have been smart, I would have took a picture from the top of the hill of Mimi and the dog walking up the hill. And then when somebody said, how'd you do on that hike? And I said, well, I don't know, but I beat Mimi and that dog. But the fact was, Mimi was probably up there 20 or 25 minutes before I was. She went up that thing, wasn't even breathing hard. I was looking for one of those, those defibrillators that they put in buildings and everything so often, because I was fairly confident I was going to need it. We were out in the country, as you can see. That's out in the rural part. But he did take me to the city of Donostia, or San Sebastian. This is an interesting thing. I said a moment ago, the Basques consider themselves very different from the Spaniards. If you're Basque, this city is Donostia. If you're Spaniard, this city is San Sebastian. That's how it works. It's the capital of their province. And Spain is a modern country. If you've visited there, it's not third world at all. You can see there's a nice marina there. I took several pictures of that city. It is a large city. Very modern, malls, restaurants, the whole 9 yards. These are just some of the things that we saw going around. Many of you might remember Danny Bonikowski, their son. Danny served as an intern here at Faith Baptist Church a number of years ago. In fact, he pulled up a bunch of pictures from when he was here. He and I looked much younger than we do now, but they live about 5 kilometers up the road from Andy and Mimi. So one afternoon I spent with Danny and Jordan and their kids. They live in a very old town. It's the town is called Segura, and it's very old. This church that's there, I don't think it's proper to call it a castle, or a cathedral rather, but it's some kind of a Catholic church. They started construction on that building in the 14th century. Most of what you see is the original construction. The city is just extremely old. Trying to go quick. This is where Danny and Jordan live. That building is 350 years old. And their house, their apartment is on the 3rd floor right there, and then it goes back to the back of the building. He bought 2 of the storage rooms downstairs, but there are other families that live in these other rooms. That's very commonly used for the housing there. You buy into a building and you buy an apartment, and then once you're in that, you can remodel the apartment and decorate as you see fit. But like, he wanted to replace the windows in that apartment, and he told me because of the age of the building, he could only put wooden windows in it. You couldn't put the vinyl windows or anything like that. They're insulated and they're good windows, but because of the building, he's only allowed to put wood windows in it. 300 and something years old. It's not as old as this house in the same city. That house, and that's the original entrance, is a little over 500 years old. The wood you're looking at is 500 plus years old. Inside the house, these beams and posts, the floor has been replaced, the roof has been replaced, but the structure of that building is 500 years old. It was, and he told me, he said the wood is now so hard, when you drive nails into it, it'll bend the nails. And then he showed me where they had tried to drive nails into it 100 years ago, and it just bent those nails like nothing. It's very old architecture there. If you're into that type of thing, very old architecture. Outside that city, in fact, the whole northern region of Spain, a lot of sheep. They are in, cheese is a really big thing there, and perhaps you knew this. Their cheese is shipped all over the world from this particular region of Spain. And Andy was telling me about all the rules and the governances that are placed, I think he said, on 7 farmers that are allowed to make the cheese from this particular region. And they've got to have a certain diet for these sheep, and it was very interesting. Then we took a day trip. Andy and I took a day trip to the city of Segura. It too is an old city. That aqueduct was built by the Romans 2,046 years ago. It was used up until 1973. It's 11 miles long, or 17 kilometers long, and they used that up until 1973 to bring fresh water into this city. That's one of the things the city is known for. It's also known for this castle. The castle was originally mentioned, I think they said the first time it's mentioned in history is around 1120 AD. It was a Roman fortress at that time, and then they built this castle on it over the next several hundred years. The castle was intact by 1258, I think. Just a lot of history going on here. And then there is this cathedral. How many of you have been inside of a Catholic cathedral? You've been there? Okay, so you know what's coming. I've been in several. In Mexico we went. You're just never prepared for the amount of gold that you see in these things. In these pictures, if it looks like gold to you, it is gold. All throughout this cathedral, and it has about 16 or 20 little chapels off to the side, and every one of them have, and I don't know if that's called an altar or what, but every one of them have something like that in it, and they're overlaid with gold all through this massive cathedral. I think at its height, it's 99 meters tall. It's incredibly tall. Here's another one of these. Then there's this 15 or 20 chapels that are going out the side of this main cathedral, and you can see just the ornate gold work.
This looks like silver, doesn't it?
It does. Background. what he said was that little chariot, they roll it out at Easter and parade it through. It's gold on bottom, silver on top. And he said they parade it out at Easter and put a little Virgin Mary in the top of it.
That'll be used.
Here lies the Bishop of Segovia.
Yep.
I just thought you'd like to see where a former bishop was buried in the church. Isn't that amazing? Just the incredible amount of gold all the way through this thing. During our trip, it was about a 3-hour ride down there, and the topography greatly changed from green, mountainous areas to this flat brown place. But the thing that captured my attention, and Andy was laughing at me about 2 hours into the trip, the thing that captured my attention was everywhere we went were those wind turbines. Everywhere. We must have driven by between 250 and 300 of them. They're all over the place. And he was just cracking up at me. I said, we don't see those in Tennessee all that much. And I said, but we drive by a place, there'd be 50 of them out. Anywhere there was a ridge, they would put these things up. Renewable energy is a religion over there. It's and look, I'm not against recycling and everything. I'm not trashing the planet, but the green movement outside of the United States, the green movement is alive and well. They were telling us all over that country, you were told what trash to put in what can, plastic, paper, organic. And they have to do that by law. We did it at the farmhouse because they have to file their trash like that. Everywhere we went, it was like that. Okay, the food. Somebody came back and said, you look like you've lost weight. And I said, I don't know how that was even possible. It was delicious. These things are, and I'm going to butcher this, I think they're called pinch toes or something like that. These little fancy sandwiches, they sell all over the place, especially at breakfast time. You can look them up, Pintxos, if you ever go to Spain. I told Andy, I said, how did we not make one of these places where we ate? They're delicious, like $1.50 and all kinds of them. That's one little cafe we stopped in so I could try one. Terry said I went way too fast. She wanted a slower look at all that food. But it was, the food was just delicious. And it was, I'll tell you, it was very different than going to Africa. And the food there was just very different. Andy and I ate at a restaurant. That right there, this particular town we were in, that Segovia, that one, I'm sorry, this is just what it is. It's a roasted piglet. And they are into little baby pigs roasted. And I'm going to tell you, it was delicious. It's some of the best pork I've ever had. Sorry if that, that's a little sad face there, but I'm thankful he gave it up for us. I don't know how well you can see it. Well, there's a better picture, I think, to show it. This is the couple I was telling you about right here, Chuck and Elizabeth Shute. They ate dinner with us after the MTR. And I just want to say to you what a blessing they were to Andy and Mimi. That some church members not affiliated with ministry full-time, not a pastor coming to check out the work, just a couple came over and said, how can we help you during the retreat? What do you need done? They were such an uplift to Andy and Mimi. And don't get tired of me saying it, but I would pray about this if I were you. I'd pray about it. It is cheaper than you think compared to a lot of vacations that are taken here in the States. And so I'd encourage you. They were such a blessing. Chuck is a pilot for Delta, and his hobby is woodworking. So he built the bunk beds that are there in the guys and girls dormitory. He did a lot of the trim work around the place. He built benches for their dining room. He did all kinds of stuff. You may have a gift like that you could take to the mission field, and you don't know how much of an encouragement that would be to the missionaries. But they just happened to be in a place where we were eating dinner together, and I wanted to mention them to you. This is the bread store where Mimi buys her bread, baked fresh every day. And, that was a wrong place for me to be. You walked in there, and it smelled like they were baking bread. Walked by this restaurant. The first thing you notice in that picture is probably those balloon-shaped or those fruit-shaped balloons hanging from the ceiling. But what I want you to notice, if you would, Can you see those hams hanging right there? There's a bunch of them. There's about 40 of them. They're called Iberian hams. The cheap ones go for about 65 or 75 euros, which would be 70 something to $85. The expensive ones, $4,500 for a ham. I said, Andy, have you ever tried one? He said, Mark, I'm a missionary. What do you think? And people buy them. They have special carvers that you have to carve these things a certain way. The goal is to carve them credit card thin. And I'm like, for $4,500, that better be credit card thin. That thing better last me for a few years. But they sold them all over the place like that. The average on those hams is $1,000. Can you imagine that? Most people in Spain have not touched that thing, but they ship all over the world. And I had, in case of emergency, if it would have gone bad, I had access to McD's and Burger King. But that's a 2-story McDonald's. They're the most modern McDonald's I've ever walked in. It was like stepping into the future. I mean, they're serious about it. The food was great over there. But the real reason that I went, the reason for my invitation, was to speak at a missionary teen retreat. And this is the group that was there, 14 teenagers from 6 different countries, 5 different missionary couples in Spain. And then I was there, and the Klutes were also there, Chuck and Elizabeth. We went to the Erdi. I'm not saying that right, Erdi. My Spanish stunk. You ought to see me over there. And then I'd try something, and people would just look at me and grin. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. The Erdi farmhouse they bought about a little over 20 years ago, and they use it for different retreats, Bible institutes that they have about 3 or 4 times a year, couples retreats, wedding retreats and things, or marriage retreats and things like that. When they bought it, that farmhouse was in pretty rough shape. Now it's probably, I should have asked Andy, I want to say now it's probably close to 250, maybe 250 years old. They did a project when they were doing this. Do you remember when God was speaking to Abraham, and God was telling Abraham about his seed? He said, your seed, and he was talking to me about, and Abraham didn't have any kids at the time, and God said, he said, Abraham, just count the stars. That's how your seed is going to be. That's how your offspring is going to be. And so Andy took that promise to Abraham, count the stars, because it seemed like such an impossibility for Abraham and Sarah to be the parents of such a vast number of people. It's such an impossibility. Andy said, we looked at the farmhouse. It seemed like such an impossibility, but he claimed that promise, count the stars, because I can do that for you. And Andy said, if he could do that for Abraham, he'd do it for us. And so that was his fundraising campaign, Count the Stars. In fact, the main room, and I'll show you the room in just a moment that we meet in, the room where we had the Bible study room, they named it the Abraham Room. And he has that verse on one end in English and on the other end in Spanish. And he'll always tell you the story of how they acquired this farmhouse. It doesn't look like much, but they spent years, church ministry teams going over there, taking vacations, taking missions trips, construction crews going over from the States. And they have a decent piece of property that came with this. And so they did their work on it. And over the last 22 years, God has really blessed, and it's a beautiful retreat center. It's still rustic. It's still very rustic, but they've done a wonderful job fixing it up. And they're showing what God can do if we'll just trust Him. And he said, we just trust God. He gives us the desires of our heart. And this place has turned into a beautiful place for the glory of God. There's a view off of one of the porches on it, just looking toward the city. We were thrilled to be able to go there and see this. Our church had a part in purchasing that farmhouse. Faith Baptist Church contributed offerings back 22 years ago to the purchase of that property. And to be able to go there and see this and what God is doing was fantastic. There's our little, well, he's not little. Not everybody was happy to be there. That's what made me think of that. He wanted out of that fence so bad, and I wouldn't let him out. He's a Spanish Mastiff, and he's huge. I bet he weighs 100 pounds or more, but gentle as a puppy. He went on that hike with us, and he just wanted to be around people. He was so thankful. Man, I wish Bob and Sue Ryan were here. I want Sue to see this. Jeanette will testify. I can be nice to cats when called upon to do so. And this little kitty was a mama kitty, so there was nothing I could do with her. And she just hung out with me for a little bit. They have 5 of them there. Andy said, we try to limit them to 5. And he said, if I could find the male cat that keeps repopulating this mountain, I'd fix our problem. I think he said it's the 3rd time that particular cat has been pregnant this year. And I'm like, Andy, fix the cat. I just stop this thing. But they have 3 horses that they use to graze off the grass. That dog, and he's just a good farm dog. And then they have 5 cats that kind of help with rodent control. Let's see. Did I miss a slide? No. So they've got this wood stove and another wood stove and a pellet stove that heat this 300-year-old or 250-year-old farmhouse. There's no ductwork and there's no forced air. So you have a stone house that sits up in the mountain that was not vacant. We arrived on Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. We arrived here at Thursday morning. About Saturday, it started warming up because all you're doing is try to heat these walls up with wood and pellets. So you can see that was a pretty popular place for people to gather around. One of the 3 stoves that were going in the farmhouse. That one in particular was right outside of the kitchen and the dining room. They had those 3, and then they also they used those kerosene heaters. They look like a little miniature jet engine. They would use that to take the chill off in the morning. But in the mornings when the kids woke up back in the guys and girls dormitory, it was just over 50 degrees. I mean, it was not warm in that place at all. So the furnaces were a popular place to hang out. The second day we were in the retreat, the generator went out, and I was explaining to our deacons and officers the importance of that generator. There's no power up to this farmhouse. So whatever power you get electrically, you've got to make it on your own. They have this big generator. It's a diesel generator. And then I think Danny said he added 3 or 4 solar panels that are hooked up to batteries for power storage. Well, the main generator ran out, and it was not sunny there for a few days. So the solar panels only work if we get solar power. So he went and rented that big generator right there, which is about 1/3 of the side of the generator that's in that building. He went and rented that, but it weighs about 350 pounds. And I know that hill right there doesn't look very steep. Trust me, that hill is ridiculously steep, and you can see how muddy it was because it had been raining for a week. And there were 4 of us. We were trying to figure out how to get that thing up that hill. And I was looking over at those horses, and I'm like, I got an idea how we get them up that hill. And then somebody said, well, we've got a quad here. And so they went and got that 4-wheeler, and we pulled it up that hill. But you can see we spun just about all the way up that hill. It was about 150 feet up that thing. And thank the Lord for that generator because it kept the lights on in the house. This was one of the upstairs rooms. It was right above that wood stove I showed you a minute ago. So this was about the coziest room in the whole building, as long as that fire was lit downstairs. This was called the sock rug. You were not allowed to be on it with shoes or slippers or anything. Whatever you had on your feet, you had to go down to socks. They try to keep this particular place. That's why you'll see nobody has anything on but socks there. We use that for a discussion each night. I taught sessions. Other missionaries did as well. But each night, Andy would wrap up. And his focus for the week was, the Bible says in the Old and New Testaments, well, in the Old Testament, it says we're to love God with all of our heart, soul, and strength. When Jesus quotes that verse in the New Testament, he says we're to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. So each night for 6 nights, we talked about what does it mean to love God with your mind. And we talked about it at the sock rug. We just gathered up there, and we met up there about 9:30, and that was our closing devotion at night. The guy standing is one of the missionaries. He's Dave, and he had some things going. This is how we called everybody to dinner and Bible study. Andy had it suggested to him, just get a whistle. And he said, I hate whistles. And he said, so every time we wanted to bring people together, we'd sing something. They'd sing Christmas carols or they'd sing a hymn, and he'd poll the audience, what do you want to sing? That night we had the hymn books down there for the MTR, and so we sang that. But that's how we called everybody together for dinner, breakfast, lunch, or for Bible study. The meals were great. There's Andy. He's cooking chocolate chip French toast. You can imagine that went over very well with teenagers and adults. That's Mimi right here. This is Andrea and her mom, Tete, and Tete and her husband, Juan, are missionaries. I'll show you a picture of them in a moment. They're missionaries there in Spain. Andrea and her fiance, that young lady there and her fiance, just got married at the farmhouse yesterday. And I was texting Andy this afternoon. He said it went great. But you can see kind of food prep for that big of a crowd. And the food was delicious. That was an important part. One day the weather cleared off and it got almost 60 degrees, so we ate out on the deck. That was a really good day. We had a good time out there. Most of the time we were down in the dining area with the kids. On this particular night, one of the things that I wanted to share with you was the activities that we did. And on this particular night, Mimi teaches Spanish kids to speak English. 15 of her students are teenagers, and on Monday afternoon, she brought all of those kids up to the farmhouse so they could practice their English with the missionary kids. And so she brought them up there for like 2.5 or 3 hours, and they did all of these different activities together, and it was great. This was a normal time. They got them all together for a picture. Right here, the goal was to find somebody that had your birthday. This was the opening activity. So there's 30 or 35 people in this room, and there's no carpet. So rock walls, wood floors. Everybody is screaming out their birth month, and it sounded like a bunch of people speaking in tongues, but it was just to break them up and get them to start talking to each other. We did a bunch of different activities. One of the things they've done, have you guys ever played ping pong round robin style? That's the dumbest thing in the world. You ever done this? Oh my word. Ping pong's supposed to be 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 at the most. Well, on this one, you line people all the way around the table, and you take one hit at the ball, then you put the paddle down, get out of the way, the next guy picks it up, and he's ready to go before the ball comes back, and you're just supposed to keep moving around the table. Do that with kids that don't speak very good English. They're working on it, and then it's a confined space, and it turned into a wreck. So I wanted to videotape this. So this is what it's supposed to look like. Then I thought I'd move for a better angle and didn't know there was a step. Boom, that was me right there. It wasn't the game so much as Mark taking a tumble. It was, I knew there was a step there. I just didn't think I was that close to it. But they really did have a good time of fellowship together. They were doing different things. This is the young man that got married yesterday, Steve. Pray for Steve and Andrea, would you? He would love to move to Spain and get involved in the ministry there. He's actually an IT guy. He lives in Portland. He's a Mexican fella that lives in Portland, Oregon, has a very good job, but he could live in Spain, and he would love for God to open the door for him to move to Spain, continue his work, which his company said he could do, but get involved in the ministry there. What a great heart. Again, what if you could do that? You never know how God can use folks. The other side of that picture is Steve and I were schooling those two young missionary kids on the art of foosball, and we did. We let them have it. We did a lot of games with them. This is the hike we took. You can see the little town of the Gama under there. Just beautiful country. They played Dutch Blitz. They played card games all together. What was neat to see how God brought these kids who at the beginning of the week did not know each other very well. And by the end of the week, they were shedding tears when they had to go their separate countries. But they spent a lot of times fellowshipping and playing games. There's the Abraham room where we met for Bible study. That's the verse, Abraham, count the stars, and it's written there in Spanish. And on the other wall where I'm taking that picture from, it's written in English for people like me. Various missionaries took place in teaching during the week. I wasn't the only speaker. I was the one who had the series, but all these other missionaries participated. This is Tim Darling, and he and his wife served the Lord there in Spain. Many of you remember David Bonikowski. This is their eldest son, Andy and Mimi's eldest. He's been to our church, but he was about 14 or 15, I think, last time he was here. He and his wife have 2 children. They're expecting their third. He is pastoring the church that his grandfather started years ago up on near the French border of Spain. There's me. I had the privilege to speak 6 times, taught the life of David, and took PowerPoints and worksheets, kind of like we do on Sunday night and Wednesday night combined. And we had a good time together. In their spare time, they just get together and do this kind of stuff. They weren't practicing for anything. Some of them played cello, so they brought a couple cellos up. The young man playing the violin has been playing since he was 4, and he sits first chair in a symphony up in France where his mom and dad are missionaries. Beautiful music. But they just got together and sang. Thought you'd like to hear that. So that was the MTR, the Missionary Teen Retreat, and most of my time was there. We'd get there for breakfast in the morning around 9, and then we get back to Mimi and Andy's house at about sometime between 10 and 11 at night, usually. A couple times a little after 11, but we had a great time, and I really appreciate your prayers for that. And then we got into the church ministries. This is the church that Andy and Mimi have started. It's the Living Hope Baptist Church, and it's more in town. It's in a bigger city, and they've done a good work. The interesting thing, he was telling me the story how they got this. They looked at this building a number of years ago, and the people wanted, if I'm not mistaken, if Andy watches this, he's going to send me all the corrections on WhatsApp. But I think they wanted something like almost $500,000 for it. And you go in, it's just this big open room. There's nothing there. Well, they thought, well, we're not going to get that. So they just stayed where they were in the building they were in. And then a little while, and some company bought it. And then they remodeled this. Well, a while later, they were contacted, I think, by the realtor that they initially talked to and said, that building you wanted is available for much less than it was. There have been some improvements. And so Andy said, well, let's go look at it. Some improvements was a great understatement. Basically, God put a company in place to buy that building, fix it up for the Living Hope Baptist Church, and then that company moved out and left it. And they got it for, I think, almost $200,000 less than the original asking price and walked into that building. This is the Living Hope Baptist Church in Lethcow. This is the main church that Andy and Mimi have been working in. We've watched the growth of this church over the years, and what a work God has done here. Beautiful facility. They start every Sunday morning with a wonderful breakfast. In fact, we'll walk here. Here's some of their classrooms. Chicos and chicas. They start each Sunday morning with a breakfast fellowship. There are some of the missionary kids from our retreat. Scripture all over the building. Looking forward to a good service this morning at the Living Hope Baptist Church. Isn't that something? The biggest part that they had to do there was build that staircase. They'd gone in there and cleaned that up. That breakfast area that you saw, that was already there. The wall dividing the outside from the auditorium was already there. Just absolutely amazing what God did so that Andy and Mimi's church could walk into a building that had basically been prepared for them. So we were thankful for that. Excuse me. There's the church, nearly full. I don't think there were 10 empty chairs there. In fact, they brought out more chairs to accommodate the group from the teen retreat. I just thought you'd like to hear them singing. I told my wife everywhere I go to these foreign churches, I love recording them singing. I think that's what heaven's going to sound like. Just a bunch of languages singing together. This is the teen choir. Just listen for a moment. We won't watch the whole thing, but just listen for a moment. Tell me what you notice. Does anyone notice anything? They changed languages. In 3 days, there's 14 kids there from 6 different countries. Portugal, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, France, Spain. I think that's 6 of them, plus English. In 3 days, they learned a verse from all 6 of those languages. All of those kids don't speak all those languages. The ones from Czech Republic learned a verse in Portuguese and in Spanish and in French and in German. In 3 days, they sang, and they represented 7 different languages when you count English in there. And I thought to myself, and I told them, I said, you guys are so much smarter than I am. I can't hardly work the English language, and you picked up these verses with no problem at all. But they did such a good job. We were really proud of them. 3 days practice in all of those languages. It was a real encouragement. I wanted to show you that picture. Does anyone recognize that? Pardon? Okay, so in the course of our conversation, I was talking with Andy about the ministries, or the missionaries rather, that are sent out of our church. And I was telling him about Amber just going to the Philippines, and Berhanu in Ethiopia. And I told him about Johannes working with the deaf in Zambia. And he said, really? He said, is he deaf? And I said, no, he's hearing. So I told him Johannes' story. And he just really appreciated the ministry in Zambia with the deaf. And so I said, well, I got a video. I said, you want to see something cool? I said, you got to see their deaf choir. So I pulled it up on my phone from last year when Brother John and I was there, and I showed him the deaf choir and how they were singing and how they step in rhythm so that they can all sign together. And I said, now the girl you hear singing, I said, she was totally for my benefit, for Brother John's benefit, because we don't read that sign language. So she sang, but I said, normally they wouldn't have a vocal singer. It was just the deaf. And he said, can you send me that video right there? And then as he's watching it, he said, hey, there's Making Much of Jesus like your church. And I said, well, it's tied to our church. And he said, can you send me that video? And so I said, yeah. So I sent it to him. Well, on Sunday morning, this past Sunday morning, on the 11th, he does a devotional on YouTube that he broadcasts every Sunday morning before he goes to church. And he said, Sunday, I'll interview you. And he said, tell about what you taught at the missionary teen retreat this week. But he said, but tell him about Johannes down there in Zambia too. Tell him about that deaf choir. So we're sitting there. And of course, he's interpreting everything as we're talking. I'd say something, he'd interpret. He hops up with his iPad and he goes up to the phone that, we're talking to a phone while we're broadcasting this. He takes his iPad up to the phone and he holds it right up to the phone like this, and he's telling them what they're watching, and he's playing this video for them. Then when we went to church later in the day, he popped it up on their TV at church. He told them all about Johannes and the deaf ministry in Zambia and the deaf schools and the deaf choir. So I texted Johannes later in the day, and I said, Your deaf choir is now world famous. I said, at least you're Spain famous. I said, because we broadcasted it all over, but it distorted the video So the people in the video looked like little Oompa Loompas. And so what he told them at the church was, he said, they really don't look that squatty. That's what he told them. But I thought it was so neat. And those people in the Living Hope Church, they were so thrilled to hear about this deaf ministry going on in Zambia, Africa. And I thought, isn't that just great? It doesn't take much for God's people's hearts to be knit together when we're all on the same page. And that was so encouraging. And this is why. This is the missions outreach of that missionary church. They're supporting missionaries just like we are. And that's their missions display. I was so thankful to see that, working on making missionaries around the world. You can see they have one missionary in Mexico. Several of theirs are in Spain and Portugal, and then they have a missionary over here in Asia as well. But I was thrilled to see that that's their heart too. That night we went to the Bible Baptist Church in Irun, which is closer to the French border, and we had the opportunity to go here. Andy's dad started this church in 1973. It's now pastored by a Spaniard. He's on full-time support. His name's Pastor Israel. He's been pastoring the church for 9 years. I think he followed Andy's dad as the pastor there. And he said, and so we met, and he was apologizing for his English, and I said, Pastor, you speak much better English than I speak Spanish. Trust me on this. And he laughed, and he said, do you have any advice for me? And I said, you've been pastoring 3.5 years longer than I have. Do you have any advice for me? And he started laughing. We had a wonderful time of fellowship with that church family. This is their congregational singing. He's leading it with the guitar. Oh, that was all Andy gave me right there. I wish you could hear it. That was a beautiful song. I have no idea what they were singing, but it was beautiful. I got to speak there that night, not very long. Those folks waited there for 2 hours after their morning service had ended for our group to get there with the teenagers to meet those teens and hear them sing. And so they had lunch and waited. So I didn't speak that long that night. That church also supports missionaries, as you can see. I think that's a wonderful testimony of what's going on over there. They are being trained to do exactly what we're doing, what our forefathers did in the Christian church. And so it was just great to see that. After church that night, we didn't know what to do, so Andy bought 70 hamburgers, I think 10 packs of chicken nuggets, and those kids ate 40 of those burgers. We were sitting on 30 burgers. So Andy's giving them out to church people afterwards. It was we had a good time of fellowship. Though. And then we got to meet some really good missionary families. That's Danny and Jordan. Many of you know Danny. And Danny, like I said, he interned here. They're going to try to be with us next summer. I'd like you to meet their family. Danny, they've got a good team of missionaries working together. Andy and Mimi, Danny and Jordan. They also work with Mike and Madeline Dodgens. And Mike and Danny are in support roles. Andy's the main pastor at the church, does most of the speaking. Danny will preach and teach. Mike will preach and teach, but mostly their jobs are they're behind the scenes, and then they also get involved in the teaching. They take care of a lot of the mechanical work at the farmhouse. Danny is a problem solver. He is a tech guru and can flat out solve things. He monitors the electrical outlet. You know, I told you the farmhouse is run by that generator and on solar batteries. He knows when it's running on the power of the batteries or on the generator. And if somebody starts using too much power up there, like we kicked the microwave on one day, Danny called from town and asked his dad. He said, hey, what are they doing up there? Because the generator was still down, you know. He said, what are they doing up there? But he is really a blessing to that ministry, both in the church and at the farmhouse ministry. Mike and his wife have been in Spain for a number of years, and a solid couple. I really appreciated fellowshipping with them. This is Juan. It was his daughter that was married yesterday. He's actually from Mexico. He and his wife Tete are Mexicans. They have been here for the last 12 years, and they serve the Lord with Andy and Mimi and have a wonderful ministry as well. In fact, he had a session with just the teen guys one day. We sat around a table, and he taught the teen guys. We had a great time. This is the young couple that was married. I ask you to pray for them, Steve and Andrea as they pray about hopefully being able to stay in Spain. He's got a 3-month visa for right now, but they're praying that God might open the door for them to move there and continue helping in the ministry. And then, of course, that's Andy and Mimi, and just a solid couple. I'm so thankful for their hospitality. I'll say this because if she was here and I said it would embarrass her. Andy and I took that trip Friday. Let me back up. Going up to the farmhouse, it's just a muddy mess up there. Everywhere, if you go outside, it's just mud. There's horses and there's everything that comes with horses and mud, and so your shoes get pretty trashed. And Andy and I took that trip on Friday, and we were gone for about 12 hours. And I came back, and my boots that I wore up there, my hiking boots that I wore up there, they were cleaned like they were brand new. Mimi had scrubbed and cleaned those boots and washed them, and they were sitting by the front door. And I thought to myself, there's a lot of people that do a lot of incredible things on the mission field, but there's a lady sitting in Spain who was willing to wash a guy's boots. And God is not looking for great people. He's just looking for people that will do what he leads them to do. And I hugged Mimi's neck, and I said, Mimi, you did not have to clean those boots. But that's just their heart. Andy and Mimi all week were just fantastic hosts, and I so appreciate their hospitality in making me feel welcome and allowing me to see what God's done there. God's doing a great work. And when you participate in Faith Promise Missions here, this is what it translates to. There's work going on around the field, and we can talk about any number of missionaries you want to talk about tonight. This is what it translates to. It's not just putting $5 or $10 a week in the plate. It is souls being saved and young men and women being called into the ministry and third-generation missionaries showing up on the field and being faithful. This is what your missions money is doing, and the prayers that you offer on their behalf, this is what it looks like. I would encourage you to pray about going to the field. I would, and if it's not Spain, go visit Stacy and Kevin Berg up in South Dakota. Go visit them. Don't go right now. Boy, I don't know if you follow them. They got dumped on with snow this week on the Rosebud Reservation. Go visit them. But there are a lot of missionaries that would love to see you show up on the field and say, what do you need me to do this week? You've got a skill set. You've got something you could do. If you can pound a nail, you may not have any idea. Here's me. I can't tell you. If you tell me to build that wall over there, I may not be able to do that. But if you'll show me the boards that need to be put together, I can pound nails. I can pull wire, but you better have Pete Howard there tell me how to hook that wire up, because the building's going to burn down if I start wiring it. But I can pull wire. I can nail boxes to a wall. I can hand out tracts. Here's what I learned in Spain. I can hand out tracts to people that I don't even know their language. And you can too. I would encourage you to pray about visiting our missionaries and think about that being a vacation some year. Take your kids with you. It's one of my biggest regrets is not getting my kids on a mission field to see our missionaries. As a dad, that's one of my biggest regrets. I so appreciate, church, the opportunity I had to go. Our church puts a lot of priority on this, and our church puts money out for this. And many of you invested hours worth of prayers on my behalf, and I sure appreciate those. I want to say, and I should have said it this morning when more of them were here, I want you to know how much I appreciate the men that filled the pulpit for me while I was gone. Our church is blessed in this particular area. Can I switch to this mic without it squealing on anybody? Is that all right? Our church is blessed in this particular area. There was a time if the pastor and associate pastor left, we had to really think about who we were going to get to speak. But I am so thankful for Daniel and these guys that filled the pulpit Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night when I was gone. Talked to people in our church who needed ministering to while I was gone. I am thankful for our church. I texted Brother Daniel on Saturday Saturday morning and said, I'm going to need you to preach tomorrow night because Jason Christensen is really sick. Jason was supposed to preach for us last Sunday night. Got really sick, or a week ago Sunday night. I don't know, a week ago Sunday night. Got really sick. And thankfully, he's on the mend. We're going to have him preach here eventually. We just got to work that out. But I called Daniel and I said, I just need you to preach tomorrow night. And no problem, Pastor. And I just appreciate your heart to serve here. And especially, and I listened to a few of those messages. I was glad I did. I hope you were glad you came. But thank God for what he's doing in Faith Baptist Church. Thank God for what he's doing through Faith Baptist Church. And let's not ever get beyond what he does through our church. Let's not ever think that this is the end game. This is where it stops. We've just got to keep going. It's got to keep going through the church, get the gospel to the world. All right? Thank you again. Do you have any questions? We're about done. Are there any questions? And please don't make these hard. And don't ask me anything in Spanish, David Peach, please. Wasn't it good to see that? I've got more pictures. You want to see them, more videos. I don't have any more pictures of me falling down. That's the only one you're going to get. I wish what I would have done, though. I really enjoyed those teens singing Angels We Have Heard on High. But I wish you would have heard their first practice. I videotaped their first choir practice. And I was thinking to myself, we're going to need some practice. Boy, they turned that thing right around, and they just started singing and learning those languages, and it was beautiful. But thank the Lord for it. No questions? Why don't we pray and be Linda? I'm sorry. Because the teens were doing it. I did as much as this is the truth. I did as much as I could with those teens as I possibly could. They conned me into playing that Dutch Blitz game. That Dutch Blitz, that was harder than that mountain hike. That card game moved so fast, but that's why I went. And then when I got to the top, I was so glad I did. It was just absolutely beautiful out there. Beautiful out there. Walking up the top, we came across about 150 or 200-year-old sheepfold that was built back into the side of a mountain, and they just stacked all these rocks, and it was just like the Bible. The guy that was walking up there with us, he said they just put these things back in there, and then the thing came out, and you could see the ruins of it. It come out like this and went like this. And he said, and then the shepherd just sleeps in front of the door. It was just like the sheepfold in the New Testament when Jesus said, I am the door. And that guy said, they just slept in front of the door at night and kept the sheep in this little hole. It was great. It was a good hike. It was worth it. So, Luann. Well, here's the thing. This generator is older than dirt. It was just old. Danny told me, he said, about 3 years ago when it broke down, he said, I thought that thing was done. The guy came in and fixed it, and it was nothing. And so we were concerned, because he was pretty concerned that this generator was dead now. I mean, 3 years ago he thought it was dead, and it just quit. So there's a Romanian Christian in town, and he's a diesel mechanic, and he came up there, and the repair on that thing is going to be less, well, it was, they fixed it. The repair on that thing was less than $75, I think. And what he thought was dead, so it's still going. It's like a Timex generator. It just keeps going. So now their plan is to get a smaller generator to have as a backup up there. And eventually they'll have to replace that generator, but the one that they'll replace it with, they got such a good deal on this one back whenever they bought it 15 or 16 years ago. It's overkill for what they need. They can use a much smaller generator, but this one just keeps working. So they were able to repair it. So, Brother Frank? That we climbed? No idea on that. The one that we climbed was 885 meters. There's a little thing on top, a little concrete mushroom on top, and it's got a plate on it. It says 885 meters for the elevation. That one was much higher than the one we climbed. But they've got if you're a runner, They have a race that is run outside the city of Vegama. It's a marathon, and it's run along these mountain ridges. And they take 500 runners every year. You have to make application to it. Their son Danny has run that race, and it goes along these mountaintops. And Andy told me, he said, some of those mountain ridges up at the top, they're only about 3 feet wide. I'm like, you couldn't pay me. Number one, I'm not running that thing, but it's a foot race. But they come from all over the world to this little town of 1,500 to run these mountaintops. I'm like, no, thank you. I'll just take pictures of the mountain and enjoy it. So, anything else? There we go. Somebody had to do it. It may as well be Abby Lawson.
What was your favorite food in Spain?
This is the truth. That little $1.50 sandwich, that little pinch towel, whatever it was called, it was delicious. And they must have had 30 different varieties in there that were like €1.50 to €5. That little sandwich was great. I didn't come across anything I didn't like. But that roasted little piglet, that was a close second, man. I'm telling you, and I'm not trying to be gross, but they had little baby piglets in the butcher shop. They're just laying out there like the whole piglet. Like, all right, it was good eating though. If you like pork. Thanks for going easy on me, Abby. Anybody else? I hope you're encouraged tonight. Pray for Andy and Mimi. We had such a good time of fellowship together. And just to see, and let me tell you, they are busy people. They are busy about the Lord's work in discipleship. She teaches all these students English in her home and has scripture in English in and around her. She teaches them around her kitchen table. She has scripture in there just so they can see the Word of God in English and makes them practice their reading like that. She's still waiting for the first one to be saved. But she said that's her prayer every day, is she's teaching English so that she can get the gospel to these young people. Andy has a wonderful discipleship ministry through YouTube and through WhatsApp. They are busy for the work of the Lord, and it shows in the depth of their ministries, and thank God for it. Well, let's be dismissed in prayer, okay? God bless each one of you. Let's stand if you would. You've been sitting for a while, and you've been patient. And thank you again for your prayers and all this. Let's go this week and look for people we can share Jesus with too, all right? Father, thank you again for the opportunity to share tonight what you allowed me to see with my eyes. And I pray that our church has a little better understanding of the work that the Bonikowskis are doing in Spain. And even, Lord, that you would increase our vision for the world. And Lord, there might be people in our church that you're working in their hearts, young people or old people, even now, to go to the field, whether it's a visit or a short-term trip or the rest of their life. But Lord, may we be willing to do whatever you give us to do. I'm so thankful for your blessings on us. Help us to continue to be obedient to you, to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And when we partner with missionaries like the Bonikowskis and our missionaries that are sent from our church, when we partner with them, Lord, help us not to be negligent to pray and to remember the needs that they have and the battles that they face. And even if we don't know what they are, we trust that you do and that you'll work them out for your glory and for their good. We pray all this in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. God bless you, church. Have a good night. No, they weren't. I beat them by a long shot. You ought to hurt them.